Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another First Look. It has been some time since I've put out a video, and that's because my wife and I just had our fourth child, a little girl named Julia. So we're very excited about that, and we're also very tired. It's been several nights of just sleeplessness, and so I've been looking forward to getting another video out, but yeah, it's been a week or so since I've been able to do so. So I want to jump in and get right back into our Colossians study that we've been doing. We've worked our way through Colossians chapter 1 so far, and we've done a series of videos so far up to this point. And here we're breaking into Colossians chapter 2. So as usual, this is called First Look, and what we're trying to do here is to just imagine you as you're in your personal quiet time or preparing for a sermon or a Bible study, just looking at the text for the first time and trying to ask the questions that we want to ask for further study. So not every question gets answered, and what we do want to do is line up the questions that we have for further study. I have done a little bit of prep just in some of the Greek words here, and that's just so that we can have a little bit more interesting of a video. I wanted to look up a few things myself. That was very quick. I just did a little bit of prep beforehand, but there are still a lot of questions about some of these Greek words that I think would require further study for anybody that wants to do the text justice. So let's go ahead and jump into our text this morning, and we're going to start here at Colossians 2 1 through 5. Now, remember, we've started here with the word for, and I've been trying to teach through these videos that when you have a subordinate conjunction like this, a for, a therefore, even a coordinate conjunction like and, any kind of conjunction, if it's on the front of the sentence, what it's saying is this is how my sentence, the sentence that it's in, fits with the sentence that comes before it. So if we're doing that and we want to link our texts up, Paul didn't write Colossians in these short little chunks without any connection between them. No, he wrote it as one letter. It just so happens that we're studying it in chunks, so we want to go back and look here. What did Colossians 1? What did it say here at the end? Well, we're talking about Christ, okay? Christ in you, the hope of glory. Him, Christ, we proclaim. How do we proclaim him? Warning everyone, teaching everyone with all wisdom, that we may present everyone mature in Christ. And then he says that this is my particular ministry, Paul, that I've been given. For this I toil, struggling with all his energy that he powerfully works within me. And then we move now to Colossians 2 1 through 5. So 4 here seems to be explaining, this would be my best guess here, explaining the ministry and the toil and the struggle that Paul has. And we know that Paul's ministry was a teaching ministry. We know that it was something where he wanted to proclaim Christ. And in that proclamation involved warning and involved teaching. So he's going to now apply this toiling, this struggling, this proclamation. He wants to apply it here now to them personally. So in light of the struggle that I have to teach, I want you to know, and then he's going to sort of repeat it again with a different word here. So we don't have we actually do have a cognate here, what we call a cognate. I want you guys to notice, even if you don't know Greek, agonizomnos, struggling, okay, agonizomnos. And then I want you to notice here, Colossians 2, 1 through 5, agona. Okay, and those words, that's a cognate. One is a verb, this one's a noun. However, these are coming from the same root. So he is repeating there, which gives us our link, right? It tells us that like he's thinking in terms of the struggle that his ministry is, and it's a teaching ministry. And so what he says now, for I want you to know. So this is what, in other words, in Colossians 1:29, Paul says, here's what I've been doing everywhere I've gone. I've been struggling to just to teach and to warn everyone about Christ and let them know his glory. And also, I would say the warning has to do with the judgment that comes of not being in Christ, that he is the only hope for a humanity that is lost. And he says, I want you to know now. I've been doing this all over. And I want you Colossians to know um, the particulars about this. Now, what he says is, he says, I want you to know what? How great a struggle I have. Okay, so he wants them to know his struggle. So maybe he wants them to know the extent of his struggle, how difficult this has been. But maybe he wants them also to know the content of his struggle. What has he been struggling to preach? For you, it's been a struggle to preach, to do this ministry, and he struggled for them and for those at Laodicea. Colossae and Laodicea were near each other. Paul oftentimes mentions Laodicea when he's talking about Colossae. So he, for instance, later in the letter will say, hey, I want this letter read in Laodicea as well. And some of you may recognize Laodicea if you're just astute Bible readers in Revelation chapter 3, where Laodicea is one of the seven churches that Jesus writes to. And what, if you remember, that is the one where they had become lukewarm. Jesus says, I wish you were hot or cold. I wish you would make a decision, but because you're lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. I mean, it's sort of a judgment text on that church. Now, let's be fair. When Paul is writing this letter to the Colossians, this would have been long before John's letter to the John's letter of Revelation. So Jesus writing to Laodicea was probably even a different generation of people than Paul writing here. Do I have the exact dates for you? No. I would guess that Paul is writing somewhere in the 50s AD here, maybe even the 60s. But I would also guess that John was writing in the 90s. Okay, so in maybe 90 AD, something like that. So could be wrong, and you're welcome to comment if you have different dates on that. But I do know that there's probably 30 years separating the two. Okay, so he says, how great a struggle I have. So we've got a content clause here that's going to introduce the what they know. Here's what I want you to know. I want you to know how great a struggle I have. And what's the struggle for? Here's two prepositions here. Well, a preposition and a coordinate conjunction for you and for those at Laodicea. So he's linking them together. And who else? And for all who have not seen me face to face. So I imagine that he's still speaking about this region. He's still speaking about these churches. And he's saying that there are some that as I've come through in the ministry that I've had, I've not seen you. You only know me by name. And yet I'm struggling for you as well. I'm wanting you to know Christ. Now, what is his struggle? What is the struggle for? That their hearts may be encouraged. Okay, so I think he's referring to everyone here, that because it's for them, not just for you, but I think the you is included in the there. So I want everybody's hearts to be encouraged. That's why I'm struggling. In fact, I'm going to put this here. Excuse me. So, and in order that, which is the hina here is a subordinate conjunction, and it needs a verb to go under. I think the verb here is going to be the struggle. I struggle in order that their hearts may be encouraged. And that encouragement of their hearts is now leading to them being knit together in love. So there's some connection here, and we can talk about this in a sec. You have a preposition being knit together, and it has to do with the encouraged, that their hearts may be encouraged. So perhaps it's a results participle, perhaps that their hearts, your hearts and theirs, may be encouraged with the results that they are knit together in love, or with the purpose that they are knit together in love. It's sometimes tough to figure out the difference between results and purpose. And you know, I think it's probably one of those. I think that probably that the goal is that they would be knit together in love, and the encouragement is maybe more the means to get them to that goal. So that would put logically that would put the encouragement first, and then subsequent to that would be the goal, which is that they would be knit together in love. The word here is interesting. I looked it up. This is a little bit of study that I did beforehand. Sumbibastentes, which is the participle form, and if you if you click on in Bible Arc the word, so sumbibazo is the lexical form, and then you can search. You can click the search button here, and when you click that, it'll ask you every instance of this word or this word with its parsings. So really, what it's asking is, and I wish it would. I wish the Bible Art guys would change this a little bit. But really, what's asking here is what we call the lemma. Is it saying, do you want the lemma? Do you want the lexical form? And we're not going to care about what form the word is in. Or do you want the word in this exact form? Do you want the participle form of it? So I always search the first one, because the first one's going to give me every time the word is used, regardless of the form that the word takes. All right, so I have done that. And here are all the times where sumbibazo is used. Now, why am I interested in this? Well, first of all, I'm just interested in this word knit together. When I read that, even if I read that in English, I may be wondering, is there a metaphor being used here? Is there something that he is, what does it mean to be knit together? Maybe just because we don't use that in our normal English, day-to-day talking. So I was curious about this word, and then it's very interesting once you search it to see some of the instances. So I just want you guys to see. Here are the other instances: one, two, three, four, five, six, seven instances of the word in the New Testament. And then when we're searching a word, we want to be careful to recognize different authors and how they might use the word slightly differently. Now, this is true for anyone. This is true for you and the way you might write a paper or write a letter compared to someone else, and how they might use a word in a particular paper or letter. So we've got Acts here, who was written by Luke. Luke is going to use the word maybe slightly differently, so we want to be careful of those. But then look, we have Paul, 1 Corinthians, Ephesians, Colossians, and Colossians. So Paul used it 4 times. Luke used it 3 times in the New Testament. And then let's just run through these. So let's just look at how Luke uses it. But Saul increased all the more in strength and confounded the Jews who lived in Damascus. Okay, by proving, by proving. There it is. So wait a minute. This is interesting. I thought that we were talking about being knit together, like the church uniting in love. Why are we now seeing the word used to prove something? And I think what you're going to see in just a second here is that sumbibazo, the Greek word, has a logical side to it, and then it has we might call it just a metaphorical side to it. So there's a logic and there's a metaphorical side. The logical side seems to be, if I could use the same idea, piecing together arguments in order to come up with a reasonable conclusion. Okay, so the logic of sumbibazo is, I'm going to grab lots of evidence all over the place, because what was he doing when he was proving that Jesus was the Christ? Well, he was using the Old Testament, right? He was using the Old Testament. He was opening up. He was saying, look at this verse, and look at this verse, and look at this verse, and look at how they're forming now a cohesive whole, proving that this Jesus, whom you crucified, right? That's what Peter said to the Jews in Jerusalem. But you know, this Jesus who the Jews in Jerusalem crucified, he is the one that the Old Testament spoke about. Well, so that's a piecing together, that's knitting together an argument in order to come up with a whole. And so then we have the next one. And when Paul had seen the vision, immediately we sought to go into Macedonia, concluding concluding that God had called us. There it is again, concluding, proving, concluding. Well, what's happening there? We're maybe taking, we're getting a sense from perhaps others, even a number of people that are, they're saying, gosh, as I'm praying, as I'm discerning God's will, here's the direction that I think God is calling us to go. And maybe you don't, maybe it's not just that one person's opinion that you take, or maybe you see it as their opinion at first, but then maybe you go to somebody else and you know that that other person is wise and trusts the Lord and is prayerful. And you go to them and they're like, yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. This is what I think. And so I think what this tells us about Acts, and by the way, this Acts 16 here is about this vision, about going into Macedonia and not going. It says that the Spirit of Jesus prevented us from going another direction that we wanted to go. So this is a verse about discerning God's will. And it's interesting to me that if you break down the Greek word, it isn't so much a beaming of information to me as the recipient, and now all of a sudden I know. God just, boom, he just revealed it to me and it was there. I think that what's behind this word is the idea of wisely going from believer to believer and saying, what should we do here? So the team kind of getting together. I would liken it to like a church leadership getting together and saying, what do you guys think? Where should we go with this? And piecing together the evidence that's coming in, the data that's coming in from what each of these people is believing, as the Lord has called them to do, or us to do, and then we make our decision based upon that. We conclude based upon the knitting together of our evidence, if you will. Okay, and then we've got a weird one. This is a little bit of an outlier. Some of the crowd prompted Alexander. I'll be honest, I don't know how, I haven't done the study to know how that word is going to fit in with this whole thing, but apparently they prompted, which is, you know, getting at the same idea here, the same Greek word. I'm going to skip this one. I just don't know how it fits. 1 Corinthians 2:16. For who has understood the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? Now, this is in the dictionary that I use, BDAG. It actually lists this under a different heading, and it lists it under instruction or teaching, and it says that this is another definition. Now, I'm not so sure. I think that if you look at the way perhaps Greek instruction took place back in the first century, we talk about things like the Socratic method, where you ask questions, and through questions, you arrive at your student arrives at a solution. And that solution is usually through them. You're bringing them through the steps. They're knitting together the logic to come together to a conclusion. And so instruction would be that process, and it still involves knitting together logic in order to come up with a logical conclusion. All right, so that then we get into more familiar territory here with Ephesians, from whom the whole body joined and held together by every joint. Okay, so there's the knitting together of the body, the different parts and organs and members of the body being cohesed into one there. He's talking about the church. Colossians 2:2, here's our verse, that their hearts may be encouraged, being knit together in love. And then he uses it again just a few verses later in 2:19, and not holding fast the head, from whom the whole body, nourished and knit together through its joints and ligaments, grows with the growth that is from God. So these three here are dealing much more with the metaphorical sense of just something that is maybe different, a bunch of different parts. We're talking about a body. It's a metaphor for the church, individuals within a church maybe, and then they're coming together as a whole. They're united. There's a love that they have for one another, and they're knit together. And then there's the logical side, which is the knitting together of evidence in order to come up with a conclusion. That's how I'm understanding this to be. So let's come back here and realize we're dealing with the metaphorical here, the being knit together, the pieces being coming together. And apparently encouragement has a lot to do with being knit together in love. There's a results that come from being encouraged, your heart's being encouraged, I think, with the results that you're being knit together in love. Now, what's the goal? To reach all the riches of full assurance of understanding. Now, again, going back to the Greek here, I don't want to get too technical, but reach is not in this, is not here. Unto would be maybe the way to say it. Unto the riches of the fullness of understanding. Unto all the riches of the fullness of understanding. So there's a goal, and so I see why they wrote reach here. But there's a goal that that you would have, that they would have, the riches of all the riches of the fullness of understanding. Now, I'm going to argue that this points all the way back to the struggle. Okay, the struggle is unto, it has a goal that you would have the riches of the fullness of understanding, and that you would have the knowledge of God's mystery. Yeah, that's my argument that we're all going back to this struggle that Paul has, this ministry that Paul has. Now, the mystery, which is Christ. Now, in the Greek, the mystery of God, Christ. Okay, comma, Christ. So that's fine. We did which is Christ, and this is an appositional phrase here. So it's going to point, obviously, I'm going to go ahead and do my arrow now, which is God's mystery. So Christ is God's mystery. If you're an astute Bible student, that's interesting, because elsewhere in the book of Ephesians, we talk about the mystery being what? Paul says it straight up in Ephesians chapter 3. The mystery is that the Gentiles have been brought in, that it was a shock to the Old Testament that the Gentiles would come in and would actually be part of God's people. But here they are, and it's a mystery, and it was there. It was talked about in the Old Testament, but many of the Jews would have just, it just would have blown their mind if they could have seen into the future. So here are the Gentiles coming in. That's a mystery. But here the mystery is Christ. So is Paul speaking out of both sides of his mouth here? I don't think so. I'm just going to venture a guess, having not spent a lot of time studying it, but I would argue that the mystery in Ephesians is the church being comprised of Jew and Gentile. And here the mystery is Christ. So if you're talking about the mystery is Christ's body and the mystery is Christ, I think you're saying the same thing. It would not be wrong to say that God's mystery, something which was hidden in the old and now been revealed in the new, is Jesus, is the person of Jesus Christ, who has now come, who was prophesied about in the old and has now has now been fulfilled in the new. And I think that when we're talking about his body, we're not far from talking about him. His church is in many ways him, and that's a whole nother can of worms to open up and to talk about theologically. But yeah, this throws some off, because Ephesians talks about another kind of mystery that's going on here. All right, in whom, Christ, in whom, so here's Jesus, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Okay, Jesus holds all of the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Jesus is God himself. He is the second person of the Trinity. He is also, as John says, he is the way to God. He is the door. He is the one through whom all knowledge comes and all wisdom comes. What do you get when you get Christ? You get God. And when you get God, you have all that God as the Father gives to his children. You have everything. 1 Corinthians, where he's talking about those who are fighting over Paul or Apollos or different all these things, and he just says, you have everything. Don't fight over this stuff. You have. I'm paraphrasing. You have everything. You have all things because you're in Christ. And Romans chapter 4 talks about us being heirs of Abraham, and would ultimately heirs of God. We are God's children and we are heirs. So Romans 8, same thing. So We have so much because of Christ. Christ is the way to God. He is God, and we have that because we have him. All right, and he says, I say this. Okay, so I say everything I've been saying here. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this on the front margin, but I'm well, actually, I'll bring it in one. Okay, so I'm going to bring it in one here because I'm going to say I say this. This is referring to all of this struggle. Okay, so I say this. I'm talking about this great struggle that I have to teach. Um, I say this in order that, so I have a goal here. What's my goal? What's my purpose for saying all this? That no one may delude you. Okay, this is going to become a major theme now in Colossians. There was a sense in which the Colossians were being perhaps attacked by a kind of heresy, by a kind of false teaching, false belief. And I don't think scholars have nailed down exactly what it is. In other words, I don't think there's a definitive word on what they call the Christological heresy is in Colossians. There's definitely thoughts. People have come up with different thoughts throughout time, trying to really look behind the scenes of the Colossian heresy, and it's very much like scholars to try to figure out, okay, what exactly is it? But I believe that, in the providence of God and in the wisdom of the Holy Spirit, who is the author, the true author of the text, I believe that it's vague for a reason. I believe we are not to know exactly what the Christological heresy is in Colossians because the reality is the church will be confronting many, many, many different heresies throughout its life and has already and will continue as long as uh, until Jesus returns. And so it's not about which heresy is it. It's about how do we fight? What is it that we are supposed to do as a church to fight against the many, many, many false beliefs that are coming our way? And so uh, we are, let's see, so Paul wants to write all these things. He wants them to know and be encouraged. This idea of encouraged, I've said this before, but it has the idea of just staying the course, fighting the battle. It's very, sorry to ladies who are watching, but I like talking about it this way. It's very manly. It is very, it's Braveheart standing on on the line when the English troops are firing their arrows and then charging forward with shields and swords. It's that kind of battle hardened. I'm not leaving. I'm not fleeing. I'm going to go forward in battle. And so I want you to be encouraged. I don't want you guys to give up on this. And I want your hearts to be knit together in love. And I want you to have full assurance of understanding, okay, because maybe understanding was what they were lacking. And so I want you to have full understanding of Christ. I want you to know Christ. I want you to know the truth, the fullness of him, because in him are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And I'm saying this because someone is trying to delude you. Someone is trying to um, delude you, paralizetai, paralogizetai, with plausible arguments. Okay, so this word plausible, interesting. It's the only time it's used here in the New Testament, pithanologia, and it's arguments that's what it is. It's literally what it means here. Logia is words or arguments, and then I think this comes from pathos, which would be reasonable, um, reasonable words. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I mean, and what heresy worth its salt doesn't sound reasonable? If it didn't sound reasonable, it wouldn't be a tempting thing to believe, right? So it isn't the crazy stuff out there that we need to worry about. It isn't the wacko belief systems. It's the reasonable ones. Satan knows how to trick, how to deceive with reasonableness. If you even go back to the garden and you look at the original conversation that the serpent had with Eve, very reasonable. Did God really, just starts with questions, right? Did God really say, that you should not eat of, you shouldn't touch any of the fruit? I mean, he already twisted that, right? Did God say that you should not eat of that? No, you're not going to die. No, 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 no. Here's the truth. God was just realizing that you would be like him. And so, I'm going to cast him in the bad light, and I'm going to, and to Eve and maybe even to us, we might know it's wrong, but it has there's a reasonableness to it, even though it's wrong. It could be right. Maybe that's right. Scary, guys. This is scary because the true heresies are the ones that seem to have a reasonable sound to them. Okay? So I am desperate, Paul says. My ministry is to teach and to warn. And I'm saying all this so that you guys would not be deluded with reasonable arguments, with plausible arguments. He says, for though I am absent in the body, okay, so we got a subordinate conjunction here. And then we've got though, which it isn't here, it's an if, but it's the same idea here. It's what we call a concessive. Although I'm not with you, I'm not with you in the body, yet I am with you in spirit. Rejoicing, I'm with you, rejoicing to see your good order and to see the firmness of your faith in Christ. So you guys are doing well, but keep going and don't give in to this heresy, okay? So this is all going to come under, everything here is going to come under, I say this in order that no one may delude you. Why do I say this? Because I'm with you in spirit, and I'm rejoicing to see your good order. I'm for you. I love that what I've seen so far. I'm encouraging you. But fight against this delusion. Fight against these plausible arguments that seem like they're good, but they are going to deceive you and pull you away from Christ. And we believe that they had to do with Christ, right? That's what he's talking about here. He's talking about, I want you to have a knowledge of Christ and who he is. Let me just close this and do a new movie recording. Once a video, guys, this happens, and I don't know why. So that's the idea here. The idea is that he is wanting them to know of the great struggle to teach and to warn. We saw that from 1:24 through 29. He wants them to be knit together in love. He wants them to have a full assurance of understanding. He wants them to know Jesus and to know the fullness about him. And he says this because there is a real heresy that they're having to fight against. And for though I am absent in the body, I'm with you in spirit. I'm with you guys. I'm here. And so normally I would do arrows, but we're running out of time on this video, and I'm going to keep it short for this one. So I hope that was helpful to you as you guys are doing your own first looks and hopefully using Bible Arc. It's a great tool to help with this kind of stuff. But until next time, I hope you guys are blessed and have a great day today. All right, God bless.